The wagon wheels moaned low through the dust, groaning like even they had no desire to go forward. Evening folded itself slowly across the rim of Jericho Ridge, not so much falling as settling soft and quiet like old linen laid over something no longer worth looking at. The wind didn't sing, it sighed, tired and dry, and carried nothing but the brittle scent of rope and sun-cured timber. Horses stood tethered, their breath clouding from flared nostrils, pale ghosts in the cooling air. It was the kind of dusk where nothing softened, not even mercy. Della June Trent sat rigid on the wagon bench beside her father, a scrawny 9-year-old wearing a patched yellow dress that once belonged to a woman, no longer living. Her hands, scraped and small, were folded in her lap like she was trying to make herself forgettable. Her father never once looked at her. They came to a stop beside the general store, where even the hitching post leaned crooked as if it, too, had given up trying. From the alley behind the store came a woman with sallow cheeks and a bun that listed like a shipwreck. Her apron bore streaks of flour or ash, hands wiped off like she was about to knead bread. But there would be no bread. Clovis Trent climbed down without offering his daughter a hand. He spat tobacco into the dust and nodded toward the woman. This, her, the woman asked. Clovis jerked his chin at the girl who still hadn't moved. Can she cook? Better than most women twice her age. She talk. She can. Won't if she don't have to. Quiet like her mama. She's clean. Not slow, if that's what you're after. The woman stepped closer and lifted Della's chin with fingers like dry burlap. Della didn't blink. She looked past the woman's shoulder toward the open prairie, where the tall grass shifted faintly, undecided. A purse passed between hands with the sound of old coins. The woman nodded. That was that. Della stepped down from the wagon on her own. There was no goodbye, no gentle farewell, no final instructions. Clovis didn't ruffle her hair or give her a look. He turned, climbed back onto the wagon, and rode into the dust, never once looking back. She watched until the haze swallowed him. After that, she never called him Pa again, not even in her thoughts. The woman gripped her wrist with a hand like a snare and tugged her toward the alley. Rules are simple, she muttered. You earn your keep. You speak when spoken to. You'll be lodged with others. Crying don't get you anywhere. But Della didn't hear, not really. Inside, something had gone still. A small quiet curled up like shame, with nowhere left to go. Her mother had died the winter before. Fever and no doctor. Just hot rags and quiet prayers that stopped working. And now this, behind the store. A man stepped from the porch shadow. He wasn't towering, but he filled the doorway like the dark fills a room. His boots were worn soft. His shirt was plain. His beard was streaked with the kind of gray that made you think of storms long past, but never forgotten. He said nothing, just watched. Watched the girl's feet dragging. Watched the way her wrist dangled in the woman's grip like a loose thread. Then he turned and vanished back into the shade. That night, Della sat on the edge of a cot in a cold room that smelled like wet shoes and pine soap around her. Girls sniffled or whispered their own names like spells to keep themselves from disappearing. She didn't speak. She didn't sleep. She waited at dawn. She slipped barefoot through a fence that had no lock and passed. A dog too old to bark. Her soles split open on gravel, but she didn't run. Running made noise. By noon, she was a smear in the horizon, barely upright, then crawling, then just a body against the dirt. When she woke, it was to the scent of leather and horse sweat, dust and tobacco. The man from the porch was kneeling beside her, hat in. His hand, brow creased like he was trying to remember how to pray. You got a name? He asked. She stared at his boots. I'm Cullen Voss. Knew your mama. Nothing. You hungry, girl? Her stomach didn't speak, but her legs shivered. He lifted her like something fragile, one arm at her back, the other beneath her knees. She didn't resist. She leaned into the flannel of his shirt, breathing an iron, and would smoke. The horse was tall. She didn't remember climbing on, just the soft sway of its movement as they rode. Time blurred, her thoughts wandering to a blue cornflower once pinned in her braid. A lullaby hummed over a bowl of shelled peas. Her cuts burned in the wind. But she never cried. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had dipped low and golden. The house wasn't much gray, with a porch that leaned windows. Patched, roof nailed down like it meant to stay. Smoke trickled from the chimney. Smelled faintly of stew. He didn't ask questions. Didn't expect words. She spent the night in the barn's loft under a blanket that held the ghost of cedar. In the morning, a tin cup of milk waited at the top rung of the ladder. She drank it. That was their first conversation. Days folded into weeks, quiet as wheat and wind. She didn't speak. He didn't pry. He chopped wood. She watched. He fixed fence posts. She followed, kept tools in reach. One morning, she left an apple near his boots. That night, he folded her blanket for her. Later, he built her a bed in the corner of the barn. Said nothing, just left a quilt on top. When they rode into town, the whispers started before the horse had stopped. He's taking in strays now. What? A shame. Always thought he was decent. She won't last the winter. Cullen heard it. She saw it. Neither flinched. At the store, the shopkeeper's wife eyed her. You helpin' out? Della nodded. She clean. She didn't respond. She don't look nobody in the eye, does she outside? Cullen handed her a peppermint candy. She held it like it was glass. You don't owe nobody explanations, he said. She kept the candy 3 days before eating it. Spring came with dust, then storms. A window broke. She helped him board it. He showed her how to oil a saddle, how to drive, a nail without splintering wood. She watched everything, learned with her hands. He bought her boots that fit. She didn't thank him. Just polished his saddle without being asked. The town quieted, but only a little. Whispers still lingered, like smoke under doors. A preacher came, all teeth and two. Much cologne. Folks are curious, he said. A girl under your roof, no papers, no kin. She's kin. Cullen said, close enough. She don't speak. She don't need to. The preacher frowned, still. It ain't proper. Cullen shut the door. That night, she left her mother's brooch by his plate. It was chipped, tarnished, but precious. He didn't say anything, just slipped it into his shirt pocket. That winter, she caught a fever. Cullen stayed by her side. 3 straight nights, feeding her broth, cooling her face with snow. When she woke, he was asleep in the chair beside her, beard more gray than before. She whispered, Uncle. He didn't stir, but his mouth twitched like he'd heard it in a dream and chose to believe it. Months passed. Her hair grew longer, her steps steadier. At the mercantile one day, she froze. The woman from the alley was there, older, meaner, still watching. Della didn't speak, just reached for Cullen's hand. He took it. That night, she didn't return to the barn. She made her bed on the cot inside. Still, not many words. But when Cullen passed her the stew that night, she smiled. Just a little, and it stayed. One morning as she swept the porch, she asked, Why'd you take me in? He looked up from his leather work. Because I saw someone leave you, and I'd rather be the man who didn't. She froze, then went back to sweeping, something soft uncoiling in her chest. Far off, beyond the ridge, 2 riders emerged from the blur of horizon. One wore a hat she remembered. She gripped the broom handle tighter. Cullen looked up. Their eyes met. The wind began to rise. That spring, the wind came in dry and curling, like paper near a flame. It whispered against the porch rails, rustled cottonwoods, moved like it remembered things better left forgotten. At 11, Della Jun moved through the days with purpose, but never ease. She still slept in the barn by choice. She liked the loft, how moonlight fell in narrow beams across the hay, how quiet it was when the world slept. Beneath the floorboards, she kept a small box of memory, her mama's comb, a bit of lace, a broken earring, things no one would ask her about. Each morning, a cup of warm milk waited at the ladder. Cullen never said he placed it there. He didn't need to. Since the day her father came back, nothing had been quite the same, not louder, just shifted, tilted like a picture frame, off just enough to unsettle. He hadn't returned, but the thought of him hung over her like frost, unseen but never far. She worked harder, as if work could keep the past away. She fed animals before dawn, patched worn coats, climbed windmills to clean rusted gears. When Cullen found her with a bloodied palm and a stubborn look, he handed her a rag and said gently, You don't gotta earn your place. Breath don't come with conditions. But she wasn't trying to earn it. She was fighting not to lose it. Then came the storm-dotted arrived on a wind that turned to sleet. Then hail fists from the sky. Cullen had been working in the corral when the gate blew open. The gelding panicked, rearing, hooves flailing. It struck him in the shoulder and sent him crashing against the post. Della was down the loft ladder before the wind caught its second breath. She found him slumped in the snow, coat soaked red. He waved her off. Just twisted, maybe broke. She didn't answer. Just wrapped his arm over her shoulder and pulled him inside. He'd never had a wife. She'd never mended a man. But between them, they figured it out. She boiled water, tore old shirts into bandages, read aloud from a pamphlet with her finger tracing the lines. His teeth clenched when she bound the shoulder, but he never cried out. Neither of them did. Asterisk do it quick, she said. So she did. That night, Della made stew with salt pork and soft potatoes. She sat beside Cullen, feeding him slow spoonfuls when his arm wouldn't lift. When the fever made him sweat, she wiped his brow with a cloth that still smelled faintly of sage. And when he finally drifted into sleep, she didn't leave him. She folded her knees to her chest and stayed by the hearth, watching the coals dim, one by one, into silence. Come morning, the tin cup of milk still sat on the ladder rail, but this time, she was the one who left it there. Spring came in wet and wary. The trees bloomed late, and the earth turned slick with thawed regret. The work doubled, fences to mend, calves to brand, fields to clear. Cullen healed slowly. His shoulders were stiff and unwilling, but his pride held firmer still. He never asked for help. Della gave it anyway. She learned how to throw a rope without tangling it, how to sand a splintered post until it ran smooth beneath her calloused palm. She crawled beneath the plow to oil the rusted hinges, careful not to split her knuckles. Every new task taught her not just how to work, but how to stay. The town, though, hadn't forgotten her. At the trading post, two women watched her carry a sack of cornmeal. One of them whispered, "That's the girl who lives with him, not married." The other clucked her tongue. "She'll ruin that man's good name." Della didn't flinch. She kept walking, but that night she scrubbed her fingernails until they burned, as if shame clung beneath the dirt. Cullen saw the raw skin. He didn't speak. He just set a bar of soap beside her, carved in the shape of a lamb. "My sister made that once," he said. "It's old, but clean lasts." She took it with both hands and placed it gently beside her bed. Sometimes silence held more comfort than any prayer. On Sunday, she sat beside Cullen in the back pew of the chapel. Heads turned like compass needles. Some nodded with stiff civility. Most looked away. The preacher lifted his chin and said, "The Lord loves the humble, but warns the impure." Cullen's jaw tightened. Della kept her hands folded. On the walk home, she asked quietly, "Do you think I'm impure?" He slowed the horse and looked at her. "I think you're whole," he said, "especially after what happened. Folks talk when they can't understand how something broken can shine brighter than before." That night, without announcement, she moved her bedroll inside the house. She carried only her quilt and her mother's comb. Cullen had already cleared a space near the hearth. She slept deeper that night than she had in 3 years. Then came the letter, stained, creased, carried by a boy with a bandaged foot and tired eyes. Cullen opened it at the table. His hands paused halfway through the page, then folded it slow and slid it beneath the oil lamp. Della watched him all day. At dusk, as she swept the porch, she saw him looking out toward the horizon, like a man watching for something he hoped wouldn't come. She waited until the fire had died low before asking, "Was it him?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "He's coming, wants money." For silence. "Will you pay?" Cullen shook his head. "I don't barter with poison." The silence that followed thickened the room. That night, she dreamed of her father's laugh. Not cruel, not angry, just amused, in the way he always was when someone else was about to bleed. She woke with her hand clenched tight around her mother's comb dot in the morning. She made breakfast, biscuits, bacon, thick coffee, and set it on the table before Cullen woke. He looked at the plate, then at her. "You afraid?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." Outside, Mercy the cat chased a squirrel across the rail fence. Inside, the air felt heavy, and a lone vulture circled slow over the ridge. The sun rose like it wanted to linger, like it wanted to stay in that quiet place a little longer. Della June stepped onto the porch, braids damp, boots polished, a basket of folded linens tucked under one arm. 17 now, she moved like someone who had shed the skin of girlhood. Her hips narrow, her wrists strong, her eyes steady. She no longer walked behind Cullen Voss. She walked beside him. They still spoke few words, but the quiet between them had changed. It wasn't silence anymore. It was something earned, something cared for. She cleaned his tools before he asked. He lifted what she couldn't. She fixed the porch rail after a storm. He taught her how to shoot, not out of fear, but because, he said, every home needs its own guard. There was no line, no label, just gestures. 2 chairs turned toward the same sunset, a coat placed gently on her shoulders, a second coffee cup already waiting. But the town never stopped talking. That's the girl he raised. They whispered, more like kept, not right. Living there, grown now. Della never let Cullen see her flinch, but he must have noticed, because his silence became sharper in town, more deliberate. At church, she sat in the back pew by habit, not shame. She liked watching people from behind, who lingered at the doors, who knelt to fast. After one service, a visiting preacher pulled Cullen aside. You're housing a woman now, not a child. He said, she's kin. Cullen replied, to the town, kin's just a word. Cullen's jaw set. Then they best be careful how they use it. Della overheard it from behind a pillar. Her face burned. That night, she skipped supper and sat by the barn, watching lightning bugs blink like nervous stars. Cullen found her. There, he brought no questions, just sweet tea in a tin cup. I can leave, she said. You'd leave because of what they say. I don't want you to lose more than you already have. He looked out over the fields. I didn't take you in to be liked, he said. I took you in because the world didn't, and I'd do it again. The next week, she asked him to teach her to ride bareback. He did, no questions, no teasing. She clung to the horse like she once clung to life, tight, determined, ready to let go when balance found her. She laughed when she didn't fall. He laughed, too, one of those low, rare laughs that belonged to men who didn't need to prove anything later. She made biscuits from scratch and carved a candle from old wax. She left it near his pipe without a word. You're fixing this place like you plan to stay, he said. She met his eyes. Ain't that what you've been teaching me? One afternoon, a widow from town came up the drive for eggs, pretty in a polished, deliberate way, perfume, gloves, blue dress. She smiled at Della, then turned to Cullen. You're raising her well, she said. She ain't being raised anymore, he replied. After the woman left, Della asked, do you think I'll ever be seen as myself, or just the thing beside you? Cullen considered her. Depends on who you're trying to be seen by. That night, she pulled down the old box from the barn loft. Inside, her mother's comb, a thimble, a ribbon, a single earring. She laid them all out on her blanket, then returned them one by one, all but the comb. That she placed by the hearth. Next morning, Cullen said nothing, but her coffee cup came with a small silver button wrapped in cloth, one that had no match. From his sister's dress, it lived in her apron pocket from then on. Summer arrived thick and slow. Her braid loosened, her hands grew strong. She stopped wearing shoes indoors and hummed while she swept. One evening, she said, you never taught me to dance. Didn't know if you wanted to learn. Maybe I didn't before. So he stood, slow and steady, and offered his hand. No music, just crickets and the scent of lilac on the breeze. She stepped into his arms, not as a child, not as a lover, but as someone who had learned to trust the space beside another. When they sat again, she whispered, you're the reason I'm not what they said I'd be. He said only, you did the becoming. I just kept the wolves off long enough. The next day, a letter arrived, not from her father, but about him. Clovis Trent had been shot in another county, trying to collect from a widow who had nothing left. The sheriff enclosed her things, a deed to a worthless scrap of land and a pouch of coins. Exactly what he'd once sold her for. That night, she fed the coins to the fire and watched the flames rise. Later, she turned to Cullen. Can we ride to the ridge tomorrow? He nodded, neither asked why. But as he turned to stoke the coals, she reached for her shawl and paused. A shadow moved outside the window. A man's shape, still, watching. The knock came after dusk. Slow, heavy. Cullen stood. He didn't reach for his gun. Not yet. Another knock. Della peeked through the curtain. 3 men. 1. She recognized, even in the failing light, the tilt of his hat, the arrogance in his stance. Clovis Trent, not dead. Or worse, risen. Cullen opened the door. Clovis stepped into the firelight, older but not changed. Still smirking. Well, he drawled, don't this look domestic? Cullen's voice was cold. You're not welcome. Didn't come for tea. Came for what's mine. She's not yours. She's mine by blood. I'm not for sale, Della said, voice clear. Clovis blinked. Always were proud. Never knew your place. I learned it. Right here. Cullen stepped forward. You've got 10 seconds. You'd shoot a man in front of her. I'd shoot a threat. The rifleman twitched. A single shot cracked through the room. Cullen's revolver smoked. The man dropped his rifle, wounded but alive. Clovis's smirk disappeared. You'd kill for her. I'd kill to keep her. One man backed away. He ain't paying me enough. Gone. Clovis lingered. You think she's better off here? Della stepped forward. I had nothing until he gave me peace. You gave me shame. He gave me rest. Clovis stared like he didn't recognize her anymore. Then left. The wind didn't settle for a long while. Cullen holstered his gun, exhaled. I'm sorry. She said. For what? That you had to protect me again. I didn't do it because I had to, he said. She looked at him, voice uncertain. I don't know what I am to you. Not kin. Not. He took her hand. Same as he had when she was small and afraid. You're home, he said, and she believed him.